And then moving to item 8, endorsement of the final Christchurch Alcohol Action Plan, and this has been referred to a number of times in considering the previous item. Phil, this came through your committee. I'll get you to introduce this one, please.
Look, it certainly did, and we had very full discussion at committee level around this. And again, I'm so pleased the staff have done a lot of work on this, and clearly in conjunction with the police who are here today too. And that's a key part of this action plan. And in fact, council certainly alone is not able to do this at all. It requires those strong partnerships. And besides the council and the police, of course, the District Health Board and Community Public Health are a key part of achieving these goals. And I think the previous discussion has made it really clear about, in one part of the city, there are huge problems in terms of the harm that alcohol abuse can cause, and this is really a plan to cover all of that. So one thing though I do want to make clear to councillors is that in fact this is an action plan. You'll be aware that we didn't make a decision on the local alcohol policy, and so today that is not up for discussion really. This is around the action plan and things that we can do with the support from staff. So staff might like to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much indeed for that introduction and for making that clear. Do we have questions for staff? Dion, Sarah. Dion.
I've got two questions. The first one is, have the institutions or bars owners and the industry been consulted or worked through with this?
I just would like to welcome again Inspector Richard Bruce, who's agreed to stay on for this, so it's great to have our partners here at the table. The industry is a part of this plan. You'll notice in the back that it's listed in a number of the actions in terms of staff training, supporting the online ServeWise model for staff, building capacity in the industry. The forums that we're going to be holding, Safer Christchurch has already held the first one, that has the industry as they are invited, and they're also part of the alcohol accords, which are also listed. So yes, the industry will be a greater part of the lab. Yeah. This is more the Safer Christchurch and the community development component of the work that we do. Yeah. So we have been very careful at the beginning of this plan to differentiate between the roles and our responsibilities under the Act as compared with our community development work. So it is important to separate that out. Okay, yeah, no, because there was just some of the concern, and this will lead into a question, so forgive me, but some of the concern I've had is that from some in the industry have gone, well, actually we haven't been told about this, and they're worried about, these are the licensed premises, so the ones who have under their own acts, you know, have to do all of the enforcement and the whatever they do. They're worried that it's going to make it harder for them to operate their business, I suppose. Is that what the intention is of this?
No,
I just had to ask.
There's nothing regulatory or compulsory about the action plan. The action plan is really a framework for the council, the police and the DHB to work together, and sometimes on a project by project basis with other partners, to work on alcohol issues of importance to the community. So yeah, there's no compulsion on businesses to be a part of this at all.
Yeah, I just don't want to see. Actually, I'll wait. Thank you. That's good.
Thank you, Sarah.
Hi. Actually, I am going to ask about the LAP because it seems that I mean, I really like what's in here. I like it a lot, but it seems like when we talk about you know, one of council's responsibilities is policy, those kind of things. It almost specifically doesn't mention the fact that we could do a LAP that would really enhance the priority area 3 here. And it seems to sort of avoid that. And I'm not sure if that's just to avoid controversy, to avoid the concerns that Dion had maybe. But it would seem to me that council getting on and doing a LAP would be a key part of that priority area 3 for us.
The two link, but we were conscious of this document being able to stand alone whether the council did or didn't have a LAP. And so those, the lack of hard wiring, if you like, between the alcohol action plan and the LAP is absolutely intentional, and it's designed to enable this to function on its own.
Yeah.
The LAP is a regulatory tool.
Yep.
So while there may be a dotted line between the two in terms of desired outcomes, they operate in completely different spaces.
Yeah, I know. It's just that if there's action plans, it would seem that one of the actions council could do to contribute towards the outcomes that we want in here would be to do the LAP, and it's odd that that isn't in there as one of the actions. And
that will be something that the council considers at some point, but to almost preempt a council decision to have a LAP by having it as an action, I think might be counterproductive.
Or to work towards. I mean, we've already made a council decision to work towards a new LAP, so...
You may decide to have one, or you may decide not to, so...
yeah.
We've been very careful to separate it out so as we can carry on with our safety and community development work without being influenced by what you decide with the LAP.
Yeah, but it seems almost like a bit of a lost opportunity, because then we could decide here that we want to bolster that process.
I'm not sure that that would be the intention of the resolution here, to impact on any future decision regarding the LAP.
I think what we're hearing quite loud and clear is that there are two separate processes. Yeah. Yes, there's a link between the two, but there's also a distinction between the two, and the way that we endorse this Christchurch Alcohol Action Plan needs to take into account that there is a further decision-making process, and we shouldn't preempt that decision-making process so that this stands alone regardless of what the outcome of that process is. And obviously what the outcome of that process is will be subject to further debate on that process rather than this process.
Correct.
Any further questions? You, Raf.
Thank you. So this is an action plan, and I'm looking through it, and it's got some excellent strategies in there. But to me, there isn't a lot of action in here. There's a lot of things like encourage, collaborate, support, investigate, monitor, promote. But I'm not seeing a lot of hard-edged action. And there's one piece for me, I think, in the community space, which is quite important. It's on page 82 or 25 of the document, where we're looking at supporting enable and support citizen participation in licensing processes. And we've got here support the development of web-based public notification of all alcohol licensing applications, investigate strategies to increase assistance to communities seeking involvement in the licensing process. Communities tell us time and time again they don't want new liquor shops in their communities, plain and simple. So I don't see that there's any action here, unless I've missed something.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, yeah, your tool to deal with licensing decisions like that is a LAP, and what this action plan is advocating is in providing communities with the tools to enable them to have their views considered as part of any licensing decision, whether there's a LAP there or not.
Well, okay, I'm not convinced. I mean, maybe I would have called it an alcohol strategy rather than an action plan, but that's just...
We do have an implementation plan currently being written, so we have a contractor who's working part-time until July. She's been funded by Health Promotion Agency, and Richard, myself and the DHB are part of the advisory group that work with her. So that will specify it. We're already in partnership with these multiple groups that are listed at the back there, and best practice projects are being developed. We just haven't got to that more specific stage that you're requesting.
Great, thank you. So Anne, Vicky, Yanni.
Thank you very much for all the work you've done to provide us with this information. You talk about high-profile social marketing campaign to address binge drinking and harmful drinking, obviously. Have you got the resources to do that?
That would be Health Promotion Agency's responsibility. They've now joined the advisory group. So it's just about partnering.
Yes.
Our part of that might be ensuring that those resources and those key consistent messages were at public events that the council is supporting.
Right.
For example, yeah.
can I follow a further question,
Yep,
please?
please do.
Just how do we strengthen that collaboration in terms of the council events things? Can you see that happening?
Yes, most certainly, and we've already started on that. So yeah, it's about joining the dots. It's not really necessarily about doing a lot of new things that each of the individual partners weren't already doing, but we know that if we do it together with the overlay of best practice, that we'll get better outcomes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Vicky.
To follow up the point that Raf was making, because time and time again we get applications for off licences or more liquor stores in locations where there are already 6, 8, 10 of them around, and unless somebody is regarded by ALA, is it the alcohol licensing outfit, as having status in that debate, they're not allowed to submit. So it's quite a formal sort of process and quite off-putting for a lot of people, and also they're sometimes not regarded as having status before that. Is there anything that we could possibly look at that would create a more creative solution rather than the current one, which doesn't seem to create a solution? It creates a solution for the alcohol industry but not for the communities that they're going into, that we haven't thought of in this, that would actually reduce the number of outlets?
Your regulatory tool is your lap.
Yes, I understand that, and that's fraught.
Yeah.
So is there something that's not in here that isn't a lap that we could do in the meantime?
No, because it's a very legislative and prescriptive process, but
What if we had a temporary ban on any more liquor stores?
we were unable to do that other than through a lap.
Thank you, Yanni.
It's a similar point. What I don't see is us putting the resources in to enable the community to participate in these district licensing processes. Have you considered, or when do we consider the resources that we could put in? I mean, you've got who's leading, but there's no resources attached.
There is information and guidance and templates on the council website for people who want to oppose or have their views known in a licence application process. So that includes a template for a community, what do you call it?
Submission?
Where everyone signs, what's that? Petition.
Petition.
And that resource, I would imagine, will continue to evolve to provide communities with the best possible support in having their views considered as part of those processes.
Right. So just, I mean, if we were looking at, say, on page 25, the monitor and provide communities with information about risk factors which may increase harm, and you've got e.g. outlet density. Are we doing that now, or and if so, how is that proposed to change, or is that just sort of staying the same?
My understanding is that Canterbury Community Law is going to be doing some of that work.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe I guess one action.
The group. So this is about the partnership aspect and each working within our own boundaries. And
okay. I mean, I guess our board's going through an interesting thing where we've got the licence in Ferry Road, and trying to get information around the harm will be very interesting. I'm not sure our council systems are able to record CSRs around things like broken glass in relation to alcohol licences at the moment.
We're hoping to be able to share more information with the partners. That includes ED, the emergency department, the police over time, and each of us are looking at how we do that.
Okay.
Thank you. So now into supplementary questions. Anne and then Sarah. Anne.
This is really not a question, but a response to some of the points being made about what can communities do. And there are examples of where community boards have successfully lobbied and fought against a liquor outlet being brought into the community. And the community law, Canterbury Community Law, have got very good advice that they can offer in that process of fighting.
We are still in questions at the moment, so this might be better handled in debate.
Sure. Okay.
That's fine,
I was
thank
just
you.
responding to the questions that Vicky and...
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine, but we can come to that in debate, that's no problem. So Sarah and then Tim.
Okay, thanks. I'm just super aware that when we do eventually get to the lab, and that is a different thing to this, that, you know, as we've seen, it can be quite a highly fraught, quite judicial process with risks of litigation, all of those kind of things. Is there anything in here, for example, stuff on reducing alcohol-related crime and violence in the nighttime economy kind of statements, and that we're deliberately wanting to reduce, whatever the title is for, the reduce exposure, accessibility and availability? Are any of those statements likely to lead to us being seen as, for example, predetermined in what we might introduce in a lap if we as a council sign off on those kind of statements now?
What?
I mean, if we're signing off an action plan that says we're deliberately as a council looking to reduce exposure and accessibility and availability of alcohol, and that we're looking to reduce the impacts in the nighttime economy, are we going to open ourselves up to judicial concerns from businesses in the central city, for example, saying that we've been predetermined ahead of the lap?
Well, maybe if Gail explains those terms first.
Well, I'll just answer in terms of, if you need to read the whole document in a way in context, because it talks about social supply, not just the they do, but they're allowed to buy it if they're, so it's about who then passes it on to those that are underage. I mean, that's only the youth aspect, but so this is more that aspect of it, and the diagrams try to,
It's not necessarily that they would be successful, but the risks that we're opening ourselves up to.
We have had a... Sure, and I feel we've been very careful to do that. We have had this looked at by our legal department. Yes, we have. And I guess that's why we don't have the lap in here, that we don't wish to blur that boundary at all, really, because this is part of our other work that we do already in the neighbourhood setting and at the metropolitan setting. Well, at the beginning, at the very beginning on pages 2 and 3, it talks about the scope of this and the fact that each of the partners already have statutory responsibilities under the Act, and then it talks about the role of the council and that there's been care to separate the functions. So we felt that covered that, and it is referred to a couple of other times in the document as well. But hopefully, I mean, I do hope we have. Certainly that was our intention.
Yeah, and I mean, it's pretty clear that one will be in the context of the other. Any discussion that we have around the lap will be in the context of the fact that we have this alcohol action plan, and any consideration of the actions in the alcohol action plan in the future, if and when we do have a lap, will be in that context as well. So again, there's a link between the two, clearly, even though they're two separate pieces of work.
It's not uncommon for council to wear two hats, and so we're pretty used to navigating those differences.
Okay, I'm quite keen to move this on. So we've got Tim, Vicky, and then back to Phil. Tim.
Thank you. Whenever we kind of get an application for an liquor outlet, the community feels, and this is all anecdotal, but I would support it, that they are behind the 8 ball because the applicant has the advantage. Now, that's the feeling in the communities. So, as one of the big questions, and I guess it comes back to, should we be looking at how we can change that perception, or how can we, if it is a valid statement, how can we change that? Because our communities make up what isn't the whole kind of essence of why we're here. So how can we do that? Because I looked through this, like for instance, working with event organisers with alcohol. If you don't have an alcohol management plan that's not acceptable, you don't get your liquor licence, and you shouldn't actually get one if you're that unprofessional. We talk about sports clubs. There are a lot of groups that do a lot of training with their staff, and I think it has to have improved over the last 10 years, surely. So how can we, are we missing the major point here with trying to reduce the accessibility of alcohol?
Again, that is a lap issue. So that's regulating how and where and when people can access alcohol is a regulatory issue dealt with through the lap.
Shouldn't we do the lap first then and work with them? Because, it's just,
There's no action.
I appreciate the work that's been done, but, in my history with events, we went through our alcohol management plan and our processes and our staff, and, you always got someone, we were talking thousands of people at events, so there were always one or two, but you were always trying to be vigilant. But when so with council events which are free, and you got young people or people who are preloading, they got it from elsewhere. So isn't the elsewhere the problem? And you're saying that it's the lap, so therefore shouldn't we combine the two to work hand in hand?
The two, if we have both, we need to make sure they do work hand in hand.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any requirement to have one before the other. They're intentionally been built to operate independently.
But the single point problem is access to alcohol, whether it's for young people and the problems that take. So if you reduce the access, would that not be the start-up point?
And this document deals with social access, and the LAC will deal with commercial access.
And I think, again, the point is made clear. There are two different streams of work that deal with problems or issues which inevitably cross over, but the function of each work stream is quite different, even though they both land to outcomes that obviously combine in the one space.
That's a bureaucratic.
Okay, Vicky and then Phil, and then we'll get a mover and seconder and move into debate. So, Vicky.
I'm going to have one more go on the on the priority area 3, reduce exposure, accessibility and availability, and to pick up Tim's point and Raf's earlier point about how an application comes in, it's notified, the community then has to mobilise, a la a recent one in Hornby, and do quite a lot of work to actually stop that happening. So if there are areas, Linwood maybe, Woolston maybe, Hornby maybe there's a lot of others, where we feel that there are enough already, could we not have an automatic response from all of these amazing people that you've got together to write this? And you've obviously done huge amounts of work in putting this together, because you've even got white elephants and red frogs involved, which is just amazing. So could we have an automatic response such that any application for those areas that we already know to be overstocked with liquor stores particularly, could have a automatic objection go in from all of these organisations that you've managed to get together for this?
Well, I don't know about automatic, but certainly community public health, that's a core part of their work, is working with communities to support them around, and they're one of the partners, but we just can't preempt those things, like we've been moving outside of our jurisdiction.
Well, would you? So because Tim's point is that by the time the community hears about it, it's gone around sort of, and then people have got a meeting, it's already 3 weeks into the hearing and they've got to have everything in within another 2 weeks, and they've never done that sort of thing before. And it requires a lot of effort on their behalf and mobilising others. Could there be some, okay, we've got enough of these in these areas and we want to, as one of our priorities, reduce exposure, etc., and availability, exposure, availability and accessibility. Could we not have just some trigger that just means there are applications that go in, or some process that levels the playing field for the community versus the liquor store?
Is the question appropriate, though, for the piece of work that we're considering at the moment?
Yes. It's actually even in the report.
It is.
Just for once.
There is certainly resources on the council website to assist communities to do that.
But they don't know that, Gavin.
And we can look at whether there's a way to alert communities at an earlier stage, perhaps, or even to have template documents, a larger range of template documents that they can access. But the robust way of saying that there will be no more licences in a particular area is through your lap.
Yes, no, I get that.
And I understand you're wanting a stopgap.
I totally get that, but there is also a process by which people make application, and as Tim says, there's an unequal playing field, unlevel playing field. And so what I want to do is level up those who are opposed to it to those who are wanting to make money from it.
Maybe that's something that the steering group could discuss in more detail with you.
I mean, certainly.
We'd love you to.
You know, the other partners in the plan work on that. It's not necessarily what I do in my role.
No, I'm not.
Yeah. And I think we've just, it's just that boundaries again, because we're very concerned to not lead this down a different track.
I totally get that, but you've got together an amazing array of community organisations, all of whom are on the same page in relation to alcohol. And I just think there must be something outside of waiting for a lap that we can do that's a bit creative, that actually just makes it a bit fairer.
So you've heard loud and clear, I think, from a number of councillors this morning that this is an area of real concern. We've certainly heard that there are actions that we can take in the preparation of a lap that would address some of these issues, but we also know that that will take some time. I think there's a very strong message which has come through today around the proliferation of liquor outlets in certain areas that are not supported by the community, whether that's something that can be further considered as a result of what's in this document or whether it's something that needs to be put on the radar for other discussions. Certainly it's clear that that's a concern in a number of areas of the city, and it's something that we'd like to be able to address, whether through this piece of work or whether through the lap or in some other way. But there's a strong message that that's a concern. Phil, did you have a question? Right, okay, I'm keen to wrap up on questions on this. So, Yanni.
I just appreciate we're not going to find all the answers today, but when I look through the actions, there's no time frames as well, and particularly the one around citizen participation. Are we able to put a time frame on getting a report back on what we can do? I mean, a number of us will have ideas and we'll have opportunities to learn in the next few months, particularly I think with what happens in Ferry Road. So are we able to get a report back on what those strategies could be and what funding would be required to introduce those?
Yeah, so as I said, we've got an implementation plan being written underneath this that has timelines in it, and we're reporting quarterly to Safer Christchurch under Councillor Galloway, so there's no reason why that report couldn't come here, and then more if you wished.
Would that report be more appropriate to bring to the relevant committee?
What do you think?
Or maybe as well, not instead?
I have a few ideas that we could perhaps get into talk about and debate when we get when we get to that, if we're going to debate this after.
Should we not have some resolution that talks about the time frame for the implementation plan being done, so that the issue that people have raised today around the actions, we get some understanding?
So if we had a note if we made an item 2 which was a note, so note that an implementation plan is currently being developed.
And will be reported back to council at this particular date, or? I mean, my concern is that we're doing the LTP. Some of these things might require budget, which I don't see how we get a chance to have that discussion because of the timing of this.
Right. Do we want this reported back to council, or do we want it to come to the committee, though? Yeah. Yeah. So will be reported to the council via Safer Christchurch and the Social Community Development and Housing Committee, which I think is appropriate in this place, and certainly not saying that Safer Christchurch isn't the right place for this to come to, but just given the level of interest in this particular issue, the committee has got the ability to consider that and then make recommendations.
Right, and I just had one final question. Previously, when we did the lap, we were advised that there was no evidence that there was a proliferation or a harm with alcohol licences in lower socioeconomic areas. do we have enough information, or do we have processes underway through this action plan that we will be able to get the information around what harm has been caused in lower socioeconomic areas?
I'm not sure that we can specify to particular areas in Christchurch, but certainly we can give data from around New Zealand.
Right. And so currently under this action plan, we would be sufficiently informed as to the harm that's been caused in those areas?
As best as we can get the information. Yeah, I mean, the information has to come, as you know, the information has to come from the people who are either policing the ambulances, maybe Aviva for the family violence. So that is why we're using this collaborative approach. It's only as strong as its data gathering. There are some challenges with some of it. We already know that in the health sector, but yes, I mean, that's our intention. It is one of the core things that we share that information. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Now, are there further questions? We're still in questions, we're not yet in debate. Are there further questions? Jimmy, and I'm really keen to move this on.
I quickly ask a question. Because I review your document, you particularly mentioned regarding to the time frame is 5 years, but you already commenced from the 2016 up to the 2021, 5 years, am I right?
Yes, well, we started writing the plan at that time.
That's my concern, because the action plan most important is for implementation, but you mentioned they did have implementation because like keep a Christchurch safer, etc. But my concern, at the moment we establish long-term plan, whether for the following 3 years, particularly 2018 to 21, those 3 years, that's a key time period. You put on those the budget on the different different contract, the kind of unit or maybe the different sector on that. Okay. You already put on that.
Yeah.
Already. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Now, Anne, this is a question? All right, yeah, well, that's exactly where I'm coming from. So, Phil, have you indicated that you're happy to move this? And Anne, you're happy to second. So now let's move into debate. Right. Anne, Yanni. Anne.
Okay, I've been sitting here feeling really agitated because of lots of things that I wanted to say but couldn't because it was question time. But we actually ran a forum. The Safer Christchurch Strategy Committee ran a forum dealing with exactly the kind of issues that you're talking about here. We had the police and we had the ED, the emergency department of the hospital, the senior clinician there, and we had representatives from the industry, and we talked through a lot of these issues, and we brought people together. We had 60 people there, and they talked about their concerns and how we can work together to address the obviously very high concern that we all have about alcohol harm. So we might have to do that again and remind you to attend, those of you who are interested. One of the thoughts that I hear what you're saying is that communities don't feel as if they have enough power. One of the great initiatives that came out of that was, or an idea actually, was that the Community Law Centre meets with community board chair people and takes them through a framework of how they can address standing up opposing alcohol outlets in their community. So to share that knowledge and to empower each other. So maybe even collectively community board chairs can write up a statement and that can be the kind of collective impact sort of approach that we're talking about here. So we need to empower these groups to do that, and this is what this is all about. This Christchurch Alcohol Action Plan is just about that. It's about bringing us together and collectively fighting this issue and empowering each other. So obviously I'm going to ask that you endorse this today.
Thank you. Phil.
Look, I think that the questions today have sort of really raised, I guess, the seriousness of the whole problem of alcohol, and something that in fact as a society and probably as a council we haven't given the same sort of attention as we have to other massive issues. And like what is in the report is that the estimated cost of what we're talking about in New Zealand is $6.5 billion each year. So in fact how we address this is actually does take some careful planning, and there is no silver bullet for this one at all, however, there are clear actions which are being undertaken, and the implementation plan will address those. Clearly there's a sense of frustration around this now that's been raised by councillors today. However, it is clear in the report that this plan, action plan, isn't a substitute for the LAP at all, and the focus is on the non-regulated drinking environments that can be addressed before we get a LAP. If anything, though, and it's my personal view, is that as a council we should ask that the LAP be proceeded with forthwith, as quickly as soon as possible, because all the questions that have been raised today in terms of concern actually are focused around that, and I get there is that area in between, though, that I think we are clear on, and that is that where communities need support to make their objections, for example, around liquor outlets and the proliferation of them, that is something that clearly has come clear, I think, today through the questions, and something which I'm sure as a council and our community development workers, staff, that we can approach. So, I think there's a lot at it. It is a fairly high level in this action plan that can be achieved. It's clear that we know with the support of the police and community mental health and community public health, that in fact we can make a lot of progress on this. We sure have a long way to go. So I'd urge councillors to support the recommendations that are in front of us.
Thank you. Yanni, Tim, Dion. Yanni.
I won't relitigate the points that have been made, but I'll just make one point which I think is really important, and that is that there's a community planning deficit in the city, and it existed before the earthquakes, but it's been exacerbated post-earthquake, and that is that the communities are shut out of planning because it costs too much, and the people with the most amount to gain have the most resources, and the people who often can lose the most have the least amount of resources. So, you know, I've previously put forward to council that we need to look at a fund to set up a community planning institute or centre where the community can actually get good advice, can attain expert advice, technical advice to participate in these very complicated legal processes. And, you know, we haven't even talked about our district plan. Our district plan should be the vehicle by which we control land use in our city. And, you know, the key objectives in that at the moment are to reduce community notification, to reduce urban design, and to reduce the need for consents. So there's a huge barrier to community participation in land use decisions, and I think it's time that we do address it. And, you know, I think if you look at the community law, which has been mentioned in here, that's been an excellent model for some legal services, but I think we definitely need to get that report back around the implementation plan, around what would be required to have a proper, well-resourced community planning centre in our city that enables people to participate. Because at the moment, people do feel shut out. There's a lack of information, a lack of resources, and huge barriers. And, you know, I think the other thing is that the community boards are going through participation in these processes, and it would be good at some stage, maybe as part of the implementation plan, to talk to them. But, you know, I think it's important to have an action plan, but we do need to get some firm things in terms of timeframes, resourcing, and stick to it. So I look forward to that implementation plan coming back.
Tim.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone and all the groups that worked on this. I think it's outstanding, and it's a hell of a lot of work. And looking at the other side of it, the LAP, I mean, it's a very complicated process, but thank you very much for you and all those that took part of it. I think it's good, and I will support it. I guess we as community boards get the information. It's mailed out to us when people make applications, but I guess it's looking at the process and turning it on its head, perhaps, because if the LAP, with bureaucratic seniority, if you like, I think the LAP should actually come to this group and work from this group, because this group seems to be the one at the coalface with the human beings that we all represent. It's not bureaucratic or bureaucracy that we should be representing or process. It is actually the people that make it and why it is all there. So personally, I think we should start maybe looking at our processes and turning them around, because the last thing I think, and I will disagree with my colleague to my left, the last thing that we need is another organisation or body or group that the public need to go to, although designed to be streamlined. Bureaucracy for most human beings, but most of our citizens, is foreign to them. They don't want to be part of it, although their lives are controlled by it, whether it's from the central government or council. but it's not a natural process. We live it, we look at the websites, we go through it all, but it is not a natural process. So I think if we can do that. With regards to the licensing information coming to community boards, the gap there is the community board to the community. And if we can somehow turn that round so the application clock starts when the community board says it starts, not from when the application is made to the council, so that the community board has time to look at its community and tries to get it out there. I think that would be a huge advantage and change that feeling, because whether you go to community law or whatever organisation you go to, for a lot of these people in our communities, that it is intimidating to come to meetings like this or community boards, and you will see every time that you have public attending, there's the odd one or two that have a piece of paper and you can see their hands are trembling. It is a foreign process and we need to turn that around. So I endorse what you've done. I think this is absolutely fantastic. I think the process should be turned on its head and the let comes to this group rather than the other way around. So I will support this today.
Dion.
Mr. Chair, I just want to ask if I might have a potential conflict of interest due to my last name. Are you going to allow me to speak?
You've got one too many G's.
Oh, thank you very much. That's muchly appreciated. No, I do support this. The concern that I did have, and that was voiced by a few people who have looked at this since it went live, was around Christchurch and its perception of its aspect of fun when it comes to entertainment industry in the city, I suppose. And there were a few who were concerned about, is this just going to suppress the whole thing and actually make it, you know, more difficult for people to create responsible environments for people to enjoy going out and having a drink. But I think that's, you know, the strength of that is actually this might help create environments and actually foster those environments so that we do create a really good nightlife in the city that's responsible, that keeps people safe, because that's what I would like to see, and I think many people in our communities would like to see safe environments where people can have fun. The one thing that really is interesting in this for me is there's two elements really: the proliferation of off licences in our communities, which has been spoken about before, but supermarkets are a big concern for me. I think it's irresponsible actually to have alcohol at the start of or at the end of supermarkets, where you've got families who go in and buy their milk, their bread, their groceries, and then they have to walk past with their kids with all the booze and everything like that that's just there. I think we need to address that as a society. I firmly believe that, and I think that's where some of the normalisation of just grabbing a bottle of alcohol with the kids, see that all the time, their mum and dad go home or go to the park or whatever like that we just spoke about before in the last. So that's where I think this is really helpful, and I think it enables us to have those conversations, and I hope we do have those conversations and actually start sitting down and thinking about that. With the Linwood Village one that we just had before, I think this is also helpful to sort of start working with the framework as we are working with, you know, that Resolution 4 to actually start looking at what are the other opportunities that we have around alcohol-related harm in our community. So I fully support it, on the proviso that we actually still want to make some fun in our city.
Aaron.
Yeah, we could have probably done the lap today because most people are generally speaking to that or asking questions about it. But that aside, I just want to go to page 72 of our agendas, and where it says reduce alcohol-related injury and illness. Now, normally as a council we work on facts, and the facts here are very loose, like alcohol attributable injuries through ACC is 11%. It's a strange number there for $350 million because an ACC form doesn't even have alcohol on it. So that's a nice guess. So if you chop your thumb off tomorrow and go into the hospital, they don't ask you if you've been drinking or when was the last time you had a drink. If they can smell it, they may record it, they may not. And then the other one around that is ED attendances. There's between 18 and 35, so a 100% difference in ED presentations, which jumps up to 2/3 of all the ED presentations on the weekend are alcohol attributed. So when we're looking at this, we need to go well beyond, if we're going to be community leaders, and be saying to departments like ACC, you've got to put it on the form. We've got to have the facts. And if there is a 350, and I suspect it's way higher than 350 million to alcohol each year, because if you get a big car accident, alcohol related, that can cost society hundreds of thousands of dollars. So alcohol should have an ACC component in it, and it doesn't. And I suspect that's why it's not on the form, and I think that's irresponsible of society in general to not even have it there. But these numbers are pretty loose. This is a start to, and the irony of us making this or putting this through in the month where New Zealand drinks the most alcohol absolutely can, is the irony is not lost on me. Enjoy the silly season.
Thank you. Jimmy.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm quite happy to endorse the alcohol action plan, because we are aware this background actually is back to the 2013. In that time, you know, probably almost 4,000 submissions. Majority of them particular concern in the city of Christchurch have this alcohol related harm. So this is a good response to the wider community. But even at the moment we focus on only in the agency, like Christchurch police as well as CDHP, etc. But regarding to the implementation plan, my view, you know, stakeholders and also the key community should be the wider. Otherwise, whether it can be the implement successful or maybe the effective or efficient, I doubt. So that's most important. However, at least they give us a strategic view. You know, we can see quite clearly here set up not only the vision, because vision is kind of strategy, part of strategy, but you did have the objective strategy and also the priority, the area. That's mainly for the implementation. So at the moment we need to focus on is implementation. But implementation, like Yanni he mentioned earlier, time frame and the budget support and the wider community support, we can make that happen. That's most important.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Thank you.